Welcome and welcome back. If you're new to the channel, this is Morg's Hauntings, and here we discuss all things haunted, horror, creepy, or cryptic. My name is Eric, and I have once again stolen Morgan's phone to terrorize you with the haunted things that are in my head. So thank you for joining us today for Truth Behind the Horror. In this series, we do a deep dive into the real events and stories that inspired the famous horror movies that we all know and love. In today's installment, we're going to be covering the real events that inspired The Hills Have Eyes. This is a film that came out in 2006 and sent fear down the spines of everyone who had vacation plans in the southwest of the United States at the time. This film is one of the most iconic horror movies to take place in the southwest of the United States, and one of the first in its genres to fall outside the realm of science fiction and into thriller horror setting. But without any more waiting, let's go ahead and jump right into it, starting with the plot of the film itself. The Hills Have Eyes starts with a family of 7 people and 2 dogs taking a trip from California to New Mexico in celebration of the parents' anniversary. After being sent wayward by the classic creepy gas station owner, the family finds themselves stuck in the middle of the desert. What they don't know is that they're all being preyed upon. So that is the basis of the film. I'm not going to spoil anything for you. I would definitely recommend going to watch this film if you haven't seen it yet, or if you have seen it, go watch it again, because why not? This movie definitely sets in the feeling of being hunted or watching someone get hunted, which is always terrifying. Now moving on to the true story that inspired the film. Now, before we get started, I do want to go ahead and throw in a trigger warning here. Obviously, this story is going to contain some mentions of unaliving, but also some cases of human lunchtimes. But if you're fine with all of that, let's keep going. Our story begins with a man named Sawney Bean, who otherwise went by the name Sawney. Born in the late 1500s to the early 1600s in East Lothian, Scotland. I am very bad with pronouncing cities, so if I get this wrong, please forgive me. After leaving home, Bean fell for a woman by the name of Agnes Douglas. Sawney and Agnes clicked with each other rather quickly, and celebrated their relationship the way anyone would, by robbing and eating their first victim. After this vicious act of violence, the couple moved into a coastal cave in between Girvan and Ballantrae. This cave was about 200 yards deep and completely access blocked by water during the high tide, which led to the couple being able to live there in secret for 25 years. In their years of isolation, Agnes and Sawney created 6 daughters, 8 sons, 14 granddaughters, and 18 grandsons, with the grandchildren being a result of a looped family tree. Neither Sawney or Agnes had any regular work nor the drive to find any. Instead, the couple would lay traps and ambushes on individuals in small groups by robbing and unaliving them in the dead of night. They would bring the bodies of these individuals back to the caves, where they would unconnect them and eat them. The leftover sections of these victims would then be pickled and stored in barrels. Some of these leftovers would end up washing up on the beaches of local villages, which ended up working out for the favor of the family's benefit, as village leaders would assume that the missing people were a result of animal attacks. However, there are only so many people that can go missing before it starts to seem suspicious. Once locals started to take notice of the disappearances, search parties for those responsible were set. Local townspeople became desperate and frustrated in their search, and several innocents paid the price as a result. But of course, the disappearances only skyrocketed. Most of the suspicion was placed on local innkeepers, as they were the last to see the missing individuals alive. On one night, the Bean clan, which is what they called this family, set an ambush on a married couple riding on a horse from a local fair. What they hadn't planned on was the man being trained in combat. He was armed with a sword and a pew-pew. He was thankfully able to hold off the Bean clan. Unfortunately, his wife was knocked from the horse and captured. The man was rescued as local people from the same fair came up the same trail and the Bean clan fled. The man was taken to the local magistrate and informed them of what had happened. With the Bean clan revealed, the king at the time set a posse of over 400 people and bloodhound dogs. The bloodhounds made quick work to find the cave, which was overlooked, and the Bean family was found. They were found in the cave, surrounded by the remains of their victims. Pieces of these victims were found hanging from various parts of the cave. There was barrels filled with pickled remains and piles of stolen items and jewelry. Now, the end of this story is a bit of a toss-up where it happened so long ago. There are basically 2 versions of what was done with the Bean clan after this. The first one is that the family gave up completely without a fight. They were jailed and unalive without a trial, being deemed as subhuman and unfit for trial. The men were quartered and were given a slow ending, while the women were burned at the stake. The second version here is that the posse had detonated gunpowder at the entrance of the cave and left the Bean family to suffocate inside. After this, there is a secondary tale, also again a bit of a toss-up if this was actually real or not, but in the local town of Gervain, tells the story that one of the daughters of the Bean family escaped from the cave and settled in Gervain. The story goes that she had planted a tree, which is known as the Hairy Tree, but once the Bean clan was captured and exposed, she was identified and was unalived by rope at this tree. So there's a story for the inspiration behind The Hills Have Eyes. This is one of the most gruesome tales that I've ever read when it comes to doing these Truth Behind the Horrors. I mean, this is definitely tells some of the most depraved acts of humanity. Now, there are some people who claim that this is just folktale, that this is just story, but regardless of if the story is real or if the story is fake, it definitely is a story that's going to keep me up at night. The story was also incredibly great inspiration for The Hills Have Eyes. Obviously, with the film itself, it went off of a little bit of a different rail, of course, of where this took place and exactly what happened. I'm not going to spoil the movie for you, but I am going to recommend going to watch this movie. But that is all we have for Truth Behind the Horror. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you all were as scared as I was. Thank you all for watching, and next time I steal Morgan's phone, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.